It was the infamous year of 2020, the turn of a new decade. And in the spirit of optimism, it was Brady, stop. Here, get out of there. Jeez. It was the infamous year of 2020, the turn of a new decade. And in the spirit of optimism, I was hopeful and ready to leave the failures of the previous decade in the past. By now, we were 39 years old and have been trying to have a baby for 6 years. Lee and I finally got on the same page and agreed that we needed assistance. So we opted to try a full IVF treatment cycle. Attempting IVF abroad in the Barbados sounded like the best of both worlds because we love to travel, but what's better than going through IVF near the beach? So after researching the success rates and testimonials of others who had undergone treatment there, I was convinced this was the perfect option for us. So off we went. Hi everyone, welcome back to Journey On with Kayla. Thanks again for tuning in to part 4 of this 5-part series of my fertility journey. We're almost at the end, so if you're new here, be sure to check out the previous parts so that you're all caught up. Also, videos are released every Friday, so be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to get notified when a new video is released. Y'all, hold on to your hats on this one because, girl, we're about to go on a ride, so stick with me until the end. Let's jump into this episode. So to kick off the year, I was in constant communications with the fertility clinic in Barbados. And after paying the treatment costs of about 10 grand, we were off to planning and working out the logistics. And with airfare and about a week and a half stay at an Airbnb, it probably cost us about $15,000 total, which was still less than a full cycle in the US. And despite the whispers of this unknown virus lurking around the globe, we didn't think anything of it like most people. So off I was sent a list of medications that I needed to get started the follicle stimulation process, because obviously the doctor could not prescribe any medications abroad. So that was difficult to try to find an OBGYN that I could, use to prescribe my medications locally and, manage my ultrasounds. Finally found someone, and the frustration of just going through those logistics, it was overwhelming, but ultimately I got through it. So March 9th, 2020, we start our journey to the Caribbeans. My mom and sister actually joined us for support. I mean, we never shared with our family like that we went through the previous InvaCell cycle. So it was so great having them this go around. With that, I literally just did everything to make sure everything was perfect, to make sure that I did not leave my medication behind, and I had all the important things we needed for this trip. So with that, we were off to catch our flight, only to leave our passports.
So we missed our flight trying to get to the Barbados, and it was just a mess. My mom had to go on. We had to pay extra baggage fees because we had her bags. This is a lesson to basically use a carry-on at all times.
We were not off to a good start. I mean, we missed our appointment time for later that afternoon at the clinic, but we were able to rearrange things. And after sending my mom off before us, we ended up missing our flights, but we stayed overnight in Miami to catch another flight the next day.
So it's been an extremely long day. We are in Miami. We are booked and ready to go to Barbados. So yeah, we are exhausted. We are here at a cute little restaurant called Silvano's. So cute. Look at this vibe. We are in Miami.
We finally arrived on the island, and this time the conversation around the coronavirus was getting more intense, and they were taking all precautions to avoid the spread on the island. None of the borders were closed by this time, but the airplanes and the airports were near empty. I mean, we met up with my sister and my mom at the Airbnb, which was literally like walking distance from the fertility clinic. It was perfect. It was right across the street from this beautiful view of this crystal blue waters of the Atlantic Ocean. So we got situated that night and enjoyed a beautiful dinner on the water of our new home for the next week and a half to 2 weeks.
Yeah. So we had our first appointment today. We did our scan, and the good news is that we have some growing follicles, which will eventually turn into some healthy embryos. Our next appointment is in 2 days, but in the meantime, we are going to enjoy the island and have some dinner at a place called Barbados. Tune in.
As we approached the clinic for our initial appointment, we were greeted by smiling and welcoming faces. It felt so heartwarming, and being on the island and just that environment was just so super serene and peaceful. Not to mention, everything was so clean and everyone was so professional. And the first impressions really exceeded my expectations. And that evening, they just told me it was time for me to take my trigger shot to prepare for egg retrieval. And this time we were doing like a frozen embryo transfer where we were going to have the embryos genetically tested. Because even though I had a lot of eggs, due to my age, the egg quality was diminishing. So they needed to be tested. About 36 hours later, I was scheduled to do the egg retrieval. And the surgery was just a bit uncomfortable, I can't lie, because my body didn't take well to the anesthesia, so I literally felt the procedure more than I should have. Nevertheless, I was happy that it was finally over, and by day 5 of the embryos growing in the lab, only 2 made it to the blastocyst phase. So it's now March 19th, and we're gearing up to go home after just getting all these warnings from the US that basically said, hey, if you're abroad, you'll stay abroad because the borders will be closing soon. So it was an absolute nightmare and just complete mayhem trying to get home. Eventually we did. We got home and we had to wait over 2 months to find out if our embryos were either normal or abnormal. If they were abnormal, then we couldn't implant or transfer them. So we prayed so much during this time, asking God for a miracle. And one day in late May, I was working from home, about to jump on a work call when I get a call from the clinic giving me an update of our results. And I could hear the somberness in the lady's voice when I answer, and she goes, "Hello, is this Kayla? Yeah, hey, I'm calling to give you an update and go over your genetic results." I knew that wasn't a good sign. Needless to say, both embryos were abnormal. And there you had it. It was another defeat, another attempt of putting my body through this invasive process, now $15,000 down the drain. I hung up that phone, y'all, and completely broke down. I mean, I bawled. I cried like a baby. And when my coworker called to discuss this work matter, like I tried to hold it all together, but I just broke down again. And I don't show these type of emotions at work, but thank goodness it was with someone who I could trust, and she supported me in that moment. But I called Lee because he was at work, and I just gave him the news. And it was just another blow to our family. And I just didn't know how this would affect us as a couple. Was it finally time to like come to grips like that we wouldn't have any children together? Like, would our marriage really survive this? I mean, we never considered that alternative before, so this was uncharted territory for us. So after a few months, around August of 2020, we really needed to reset. So we did what we do best. We took a trip to Joshua Tree, California, and our time in the desert was just much needed. It was the reset we needed, but it was also one of the realest conversations that we ever had in our marriage. And one evening, as we sat amongst the Joshua trees and looked amongst the rock formations, we had the talk. With tears in my eyes and a frog in my throat, I told him that if he couldn't live, with being married without children, like we can end this right now and just move forward with our lives. And in my heart, of course, I wanted to be with him. And I knew I was always meant to be a mother with every fiber of my being. I knew that without a shadow of a doubt. But I could tell he was losing faith. I mean, how are we going to have babies in our 40s? Given our track record of in our 30s, the outlook was looking really grim. But Lee told me though, he said, he couldn't imagine leaving me because of this and that he still wanted to be with me. But he said it was going to be hard, like embracing the reality that we may not ever get the family that we hope for. But he was still, wanted to be with me no matter what. So that was encouraging to hear. I mean, we had already been on a very long road together, and IVF was already a hard pill for him to swallow. And we hadn't even started conversations about like adoption, like that wasn't even in our forefront at this point. So where we went from here was still up in the air. So cut to 2021, we started to redirect our attention to buying our new home. We signed a contract back in 2020 when the market was great for buyers, so we got a decent deal, but that just kept us busy for just the first half of the year. And on top of redirecting our attention, we also redirected our finances towards our new home. So around June 2021, a friend of mine who was successful with IVF told me about this wonderful experience she had had with her doctor. She said I should at least go for a consultation, just let him know like what we've been through, what we've experienced so far. So she said that he was refreshingly optimistic and he was also very knowledgeable. And given her success, Lee and I figured, we should probably set up a consultation just to see if anything we learned was different. So without any high expectations going into this consultation, we arrived to this new clinic that was local to us. But something felt pretty different after speaking to this new doctor. And that kind of piqued our interest. I mean, he told us what he would do differently. He also gave us some tips on things that we can do that could, improve our chances of having a successful IVF treatment or cycle. And that was cool, but because it was easy to look back, at things that didn't work and just make an assessment. But it was his optimism on how confident he was about us having a baby after reviewing my medical history. I mean, he said, look, you have a great egg quantity count. So the goal would be to just tweak the medication to give us as many eggs as possible to increase the probability of having a healthy baby. So the next step to start the IVF process was to call the clinic when my cycle started. But then he says, and if y'all happen to get pregnant before then, we'll support and monitor your pregnancy for the first 10 weeks until you can meet with your OB. Well, now y'all, I don't know why those words stuck with me, but I guess it's because it was the first time I heard a doctor like speak in the affirmative to the point that I believed it. Like I believed it so much that I started to pray about it, like asking God to allow us to get pregnant naturally, where we didn't have to go through IVF. And I started to, absorb all these pregnancy success stories on YouTube and started to memorize scriptures like Psalms 113:9 that says, He grants the barren woman a home like a joyful mother of children. And I had just bought a home and I'm like, I'm about to welcome all these kids. I mean, you talk about manifestation. I knew God was about to answer my prayers. I was talking to Lee about it to the point to where like I knew I would be pregnant and we would not have to go through IVF. Furthermore, we didn't know where the money was coming from this time because we didn't want to get a loan or use credit cards on this stuff, especially since most of our money now, went into our new home. Well, the time of the month was coming around and it was due to start around the end of June. But instead of seeing that, I see nothing. I take a test and sure enough, it was positive. I mean, talk about God's promises. It was insane. And after about a week, I called the clinic and I scheduled my first ultrasound appointment and blood work to confirm my pregnancy. I thought, God is just really answering my prayers. I would be pregnant my last year of my 30s, right before my 40th birthday in July. And it was like he just dropped that blessing right in my lap at the perfect time, right in my uterus. It was like Tom Brady pulling like a Hail Mary in the final seconds of a football game. I couldn't have scripted it better. So I walked into the clinic with almost the attitude of like pridefulness, like, yeah, I know that I'm here to get tested for my spontaneous pregnancy, so let's go. But just arrogant. I mean, they proceeded to do my blood work and run my urine analysis and determined that yes, I was indeed pregnant. But now it was time for like my vaginal ultrasound. And as they observed, they didn't see a gestational sac anywhere in the uterine cavity. They asked me to come back a day later to repeat the blood work and ultrasound. I came back only to find that my HCG levels were increasing, which indicated the pregnancy was still going on, but they couldn't find a gestational sac. So that indicated that the embryo didn't reach my uterus, and ultimately, the baby was growing in my fallopian tube. They stated that it was important for me to terminate the pregnancy because if my fallopian tubes ruptured, it could be very dangerous for me. I didn't want to accept this, you guys. Like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I almost like convinced myself that the clinic wanted me to terminate so that I had no choice but to go with them. Like, I was losing my mind. Like, I wanted a second opinion. I left there crushed, like crying. And just most of all, just angry. Like, but the doctor called me while I was driving home and explained the severity of what was going on. And he asked if I could come back to the clinic tomorrow to take care of myself and that there was no further damage that would be done. Because I only had a matter of days before something worse could have occurred. So the next day I went back to get a shot to terminate the ectopic pregnancy because that's exactly what it was. And in July, during my 40th birthday, I spent it in my bed experiencing the most painful miscarriage as the ectopic pregnancy passed through my body. Months had gone by as I healed from this physically. But mentally, y'all, I was like feeling absolutely devastated about just the next steps, and my hope was fading. Was I crazy to still want to pursue IVF? I couldn't deny the promises of the 3 tiers that I had back in 2016. I mean, I knew I was meant to be a mother, but I couldn't see ourselves paying for another round of IVF. So I started to like apply for grants and anything I could find to like fund a round of IVF since my insurance only covered the medication. But there was a glimmer of hope because one day I got a notification that I was chosen for a $500 grant from a local boutique where the owner went through the same thing and was just given back. And this was a blessing for sure, but it was far from what was needed for a $25,000 procedure. And by this time, y'all, I was tired. For years, I pushed and pushed and pushed my will into this with just no success. And I prayed to God, please don't let me reach my 40s, and not have a kid. And there was no more hope in sight. And I just didn't know how we were going to pursue IVF again. And because I didn't want to put another dime into it. And finally, y'all, I surrendered. I was done. And after all this time, I told God that it was on him now. And I guess it always had been. I just didn't see it. I mean, our hands were tied and there was nowhere else to turn. So I got on my knees that day and I prayed aloud with complete conviction and surrender in my heart, tears in my eyes. And at that moment, I gave up my will and asked for his to be done. And I'll never forget, I was working from home that day. I got up, opened my computer and said, let me just check some emails. And I ran across our 2022 open enrollment, benefit email. And I started to read it, and it basically said, are you considering building a family? New for 2022, we're offering family building benefits that includes IVF. Y'all, God is faithful, even when we're not. I mean, whew. He heard my cries the moment I literally released the obsession of having a baby. I mean, the idolatry of it all. In an instant, my heart was pure and sincere, but my back was against the wall, and I had nowhere to go. And sometimes it takes for us to hit this place just to get it. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 and 10. And the Bible says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in your weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I would rather boast in my infirmities that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Let his grace be made perfect in your weakness, and let it go. I had to learn that. So y'all, one more episode to wrap up this infertility journey series. But don't worry, I have a lot more in store after this. And in the meantime, stay tuned to catch next week's final episode. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. As always, stay encouraged, stay faithful. I love you all with the love of God. Bye.